From the capital city of Charleston, West Virginia, this is Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis. Inside West Virginia Politics is brought to you by AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inside West Virginia Politics. This weekend, we're focusing in on the issue of energy. Right now, I want to introduce our first guest. He is Charlie Bird. He's with the Independent Oil and Gas Association of West Virginia. Great to have you on the program, Charlie.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Obviously, the reason we're having you on this week is the discussion about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the announcement from Dominion Energy and Duke Energy that they're going to halt the project. They're not going to go forward. Your reaction?
Well, I think as an association and representing producers, oil and gas producers, I think it's a disappointing announcement for us. Anytime that you have the opportunity to produce into a pipeline that's going to carry between 1.5 and 2 BCF of natural gas a day out of the basin, it's always good for investment. And good for jobs and good for West Virginia.
Obviously, there are other pipelines, though. It's not like the whole industry gets shut down here, but the 600-mile pipeline, the biggest one of them all, is maybe not going to happen, but we still have 3 others operating or under construction.
Yeah, I think the one that you'd focus in on is the one, it's about 90% complete. That's the Mountain Valley Pipeline. It's a 300-mile pipeline, 42-inch pipeline that will also carry about 2 BCF of natural gas a day. And they are currently under construction on that project from West Virginia into Virginia and south.
The other day I wrote a story on this and I said it's like the cat with 9 lives. Speaking of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, it's alive, it's dead, it's alive, it's dead. It got challenged in the courts, it was upheld, the permit was overturned in the Court of Appeals, and then just 2 weeks ago the U.S. Supreme Court overturned that and said no, project can go ahead. Everybody thought construction was going to start soon. So was that a big surprise that they would shut down after getting such a favorable court decision?
Yes, there's no question. It was quite a shock, I think, all across West Virginia. The government agencies, I don't think had any more inclination than we did that this announcement, in fact, was going to be made. But you know what? We will endeavor to persevere, and we will move on past that. And you know that pipeline right away is still in place on other components of it. So it's always maybe not lost.
Well, and that brings me to my 9 lives analogy, because the very next day after Duke and Dominion said they were out, Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway said I'm in, and he put in what, $5 billion to buy some of the assets. And is it possible? You know, Warren Buffett doesn't do things to lose money; he makes money. And is it possible that maybe a contingent of West Virginians will go to Omaha and see him and say, look, this is still viable, we want you to go ahead with it?
Well, I have not been contacted regarding that, but I hope I am if they so choose to do so. Yes, yeah, you go from the low of hearing that the pipeline is stopped to the literally euphoria of Mr. Buffett maybe re-energizing natural gas in West Virginia. I mean, when you stop and look at what he purchased, which was the transmission assets of Dominion Energy, a very safe, reliable system, and some of the best natural gas storage fields in the country, just ironically setting on top of 2 of the most prolific shale formations in the world, in the Marcellus and the Utica. I mean, West Virginia produced over 2 trillion cubic feet of natural gas last year. That is a tremendous place to be from where we started initially in 2008 at 6 BCF.
We're down to about a minute left. Make your case for how many jobs this could create if it gets revived. And we're going to have the Sierra Club on next. They're concerned about the environmental impact. Do you think the environment is protected adequately to your satisfaction if this project goes forward?
We practice environmental safety every single day in our industry. We are proud of ourselves for how environmentally astute we are with how we conduct our business. Thousands of jobs would have happened with the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and but also the loss of that is not the all end, because we still will invest in new wells. We will invest in infrastructure downstream. I mean, We have about 17,000 direct jobs in the industry now.
Yep.
You can double that when you add indirect and induced. So we feel very good about where we are, and we do it in a safe, environmentally friendly way. Real
quick, because we're out of time, your website where folks can get more information about the Independent Oil and Gas Association of West Virginia.
www.iogawv.com.
All right, Charlie Bird, the Executive Director, thanks for being with us, and we'll have you back as this issue progresses.
Thank you, Mark.
After this break, we're going to hear from the Sierra Club in its point of view. Stay with us.
Now back to Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis.
And welcome back this weekend on Inside West Virginia Politics, where our sole focus of this program this week is energy policy. I want to introduce Karen Ireland. She is with the Sierra Club, the West Virginia chapter, and she's here to talk more about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline issue. Great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
This has been a seesaw couple of weeks. I mean, the environmental groups had fought and got the stay in the Court of Appeals to stop the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Then it was reversed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Everybody thought construction would start, and then the two companies, Dominion and Duke Energy, threw in the towel and said, we're done.
Well, even with the Supreme Court decision, the pipeline faced permit challenges, and so we didn't necessarily think that construction was going to begin right then. But certainly we were as surprised as any to hear Dominion and Duke's decision, and we think it's the right decision.
Were the environmental groups prepared to take other legal action? I mean, the permitting thing was certainly overappealed by the Supreme Court, but I had heard that maybe the Sierra Club would challenge it under the rules of the Clean Water Act or the Endangered Species Act, and that this might go on endlessly in the courts. Was that a possibility?
I think organizations were prepared to intervene wherever they could in order to stop something that we know is dangerous, dirty, and unnecessary. And I think beyond the environmental organizations, sometimes we hear a lot about environmental organizations, but we're also talking about landowners and farmers and 2,900 people along the pipeline path that were fighting this, you know, right from their front yards. So we think that there was going to be a big fight involved from a lot of different angles. What
were your main concerns about environmental impact along the way, especially going through a national forest, the Appalachian Trail and such?
Right. Well, I mean, the path itself was always a risk and always an unwise decision, right? Like you mentioned the national forest, you mentioned the Blue Ridge Parkway, we've got ridge tops, really rough terrain. But in addition to that, I mean, it was completely unnecessary. Dominion's own plans show that their demand for gas is going to remain flat or decline. And so it was never needed. There were concerns about clean water, air. We've seen erosion on people's land from the Mountain Valley pipeline that's being constructed. We've seen water contaminations. We've seen even in Sissonville a few years back, right, a gas pipeline exploded. So, I mean, we see these accidents happen, and we know often that it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, but when it's going to happen. And clean, renewable energy is affordable and available right now, and that's the smart investment.
But is there a place for natural gas in the mix anymore? I mean, we're sitting on top of one of the world's largest reserves. I mean, from an economic standpoint, shouldn't the state be trying to benefit from that money from severance tax and so forth? Or
I really don't believe there is a place for it anymore. At one time, I know people considered it a bridge fuel, but that period of time has diminished. It's a kind of the way of the past. We really need to get on board with these affordable, renewable, safe forms of energy, and We've got storage coming on board. There's all kinds of ways that we can get to 100% renewables.
If we're going to do that, does there need to be some kind of federal job training program? I look at all the coal miners, people that may have worked in the natural gas industry. If their jobs become obsolete, it would seem logical that they would still work in the energy sector and maybe convert to doing solar arrays and things like that. I mean, do we need some kind of transitional program like that?
Well, I think we definitely need a just transition for workers. And frankly, we've been seeing the decline for decades now in coal. And so whether it's job training, I mean, for instance, renewable jobs is the fastest growing sector in the country. And some of that should happen here. But we also look at jobs, Senate Bill 583 that the West Virginia legislature passed this last session. You saw testimony there from the Commerce Department and the Development Office saying these jobs are going to come here because these large companies want to be able to access renewable energy. So whether it's clean energy jobs or jobs with companies that have made a commitment to sustainability, that's where the future is.
All right, well, we're going to keep an eye on this issue. Obviously, the legislature will probably deal with it again in the coming years, certainly Congress as well, and I think we're going to revisit it when it gets into the court system too, and now Warren Buffett's involved, and so this thing may not be over. We want to thank Karen Ireland from the Sierra Club for joining us this week. We'll have you back and discuss this further as the issue develops.
Thanks,
Karen.
It's great to see you, Mark.
And as promised, we're going to talk about solar energy coming up in our next two segments. You don't want to miss that. Stay with us.
Now back to Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis.
And welcome back this weekend to Inside West Virginia Politics as we continue our discussion of energy policy here in the state of West Virginia. I want to introduce a really exciting guest right now. Joining me is Nancy Bruns. She is the co-owner of the Dickinson Salt Works in Malden, West Virginia, one of the most legendary and iconic companies in the state, and she is a seventh generation descendant of the Dickinson family.
I am. Good morning.
Great to have you on the show. Listen, the reason we're having you on is you guys are doing a major conversion. We were out with you last week doing a story on the fact that Dickinson Salt Works, which has been here for over 200 years, is doing a complete makeover, converting to solar energy. Why?
We are. Well, we see it as being good stewards of our environment, and it fits with our mission to have a very low environmental footprint. We use natural solar energy to evaporate and crystallize our salt, and it's in our mission to have a very low environmental footprint and to be carbon neutral by 2025. So this was a step in the right direction.
I would imagine this is a costly venture. I was out there watching the big panels being put in on your roofs, and this can't be a cheap endeavor, but is it a good investment? Do you anticipate you're going to make your money back that you're putting in the outlay right now?
We will. It will cover 75% of our energy usage over a year. There'll be some months where we're actually feeding energy back into the grid without using it all, and then some months where we're not completely supporting ourselves. But in 5 to 7 years, we should get our investment back. And we also had a USDA REAP grant that covers 25% of the cost. So that was a big help as well.
Yeah, I wanted to delve into that a little bit because the United States Department of Agriculture provides grants because you're an agricultural endeavor in part. And so fully 25%. This is the kind of thing that might encourage another business owner out there watching say, if the feds are going to pay 25%, I'm all in.
Right. Yeah, and it's not cheap. We got approval for our grant about 18 months ago, but we had to get to a place where we could afford the outlay of cash because it's not a cheap endeavor. But in the long run, it will save us money, and that USDA money, it's free money. So take it, and they're great to work with, and they're very encouraging for these products.
This is kind of a signal to other businesses and companies, hey, if they can do it, we can do it too. Do you hope and inspire that way?
Oh, I hope so. I mean, that's not my goal, but it's the right way to go. And I think in West Virginia, being an economy that was based on fossil fuels, the future is not there. And as hard as that is, we have to embrace what the future is, and the future is renewable energy. And we have to do it.
When you see the contractors out there and the guys up on your roof pounding the nails and laying the solar panels, I mean, does that say there's jobs that can come with it? That could be, you know, because people are looking to, if the coal industry is on the decline, those jobs got to go somewhere. Is renewable energy an option? The retraining of, say, miners who are out of work to get them into the new economy? Absolutely. I mean, we had, I would say, 6 to 8 people out working on this project to get it installed. You know, it'll be 10 to 12 full days of work just for our little project. So and as it gains ground, I think more and more people will be working in this field. I was wondering about that because this past year, there were so many things that go on during the legislative session, and one that did not get a lot of attention, but it's certainly significant, a solar energy bill was passed by our legislature. What's the fallout, and how much did that have to do with what you're doing now? We were already approved for the grant before that, but I do think that solar energy bill has a bigger impact on the state, and for AEP putting out RFPs for private and public companies to put in solar projects for their usage. Our family, the Dickinson family, away from the salt works, is looking at that. Some of our natural resource land. It's important to embrace these projects, and so we hope on a bigger scale to be in this as well. All right, we're down to 30 seconds. Real quick, I want you to give your website because people can go on there and find out about this, but more importantly, find out about your salts and all your other great products. Yeah, it's jqdsalt.com. Yeah, and they're open for tours. Are you still open during COVID for tours, or do you have to put that? We are, Monday through Saturday. But wear a mask, between 10 and 4. We encourage a mask inside, but we'd love to have people come out and see what we do. Yeah, I've taken the tour many times, and I love their salt products. So thank you, Nancy Bruns from the JQ Dickinson Salt Works in Malden, for being here and talking about your solar project. Thanks for having me, Mark. We're going to have more of this discussion with the man actually installing the solar panels out there when we come back. Stay with us.
Now back to Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis.
And welcome back to our final segment this weekend on Inside West Virginia Politics. We're continuing to talk about energy policy in the state of West Virginia. Joining me right now is Zack Drennen. He is one of the co-owners of Revolt Energy here in West Virginia. You guys are based in Nitro. Yep. Good to have you on the show. Great to be here. We just heard from Nancy Bruns, who's at the Dickinson Salt Works. She's the co-owner there, and your company, Revolt Energy, is doing the solar installation. How exciting is this project for you guys?
It's a huge opportunity for us, and we are super excited. And all my guys, when they were up on the roof, you know, it's nice doing a big commercial job like that, and to have the exposure of doing something as iconic as JQ Dickinson Salt. You know, it's been really great for us. How important is it? I mean, look, we're in a state that we're having kind of a tug of war what to do with energy. Do we stick with fossil fuels, or is it time to convert to solar and sun power and so forth? When you have a name as iconic as JQ Dickinson attached to a project like this, it almost says to a lot of other businesses, hey, we're trying to inspire you. If we can do it, you can do it too. Yeah, and I think, you know, solar makes a lot of sense, particularly for a business, for a commercial enterprise. There are a lot of tax incentives, and there's some federal grants that are available, and I think the Salt Works took advantage of all of those. And, you know, when you do that, it really makes economic sense. So I think it was kind of a no-brainer for them, and I think others will now see, like, oh, maybe this is something we should look into.
Yeah, because they're already using the sun in their salt-making process, the way they evaporate the water and extract the salt from it. Not to sound, I'm turning this into Bill Nye the Science Guy. I was going to ask you, I mean, in a very simple explanation, how does solar energy work? Yeah, the sun comes down on the panels, and then what happens?
Yeah, well, the sun comes down and it hits those photovoltaic cells, and that converts the sunlight into DC, direct current energy. That then gets piped through wire to an inverter, which inverts it to AC current, alternating current, and then that electricity, which is then usable either by the business or the residents, and then what is not used immediately in their business is net metered. It goes through their utility meter onto the grid, and they're given credit for it. And so they store credit in the kilowatt hours and the electricity they produce, and then they get to use that credit either later that night or later in the year whenever they need that electricity. That's the first, they won't have to buy electricity while they have credit stored up from their solar.
I was talking to one of the executives at the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce the other day, and they're really excited about this. I mean, they've always seen as big backers of the coal and natural gas industry, but he said we're the all of the above policy. We want to still use coal, natural gas, but we want to start tapping into solar and wind power and all the other alternative clean energies. Where do you see this going 10, 20 years from now in this state?
Well, I think it makes really great economic sense, from the development office and from the chamber. All the big companies that we want to attract to West Virginia require renewable energy in their energy portfolios. So being able to offer solar and wind as a source of their energy is one way of attracting those businesses to this state. So I think that's big there. I also think that, when you look at all the industrial brownfields and reclaimed mine sites that we have in the state, that a lot of those are perfect areas for doing large-scale solar development. And I think when we look at repurposing some of the land that was an old strip mine, can now be developed into an energy-producing solar array that'll produce energy for the next 25 years. I mean, I think that's a huge win for the state.
What do you think it's going to do to jobs?
Well, here's what I can tell you. I know that there's only a handful of solar installers and developers in the state, and I can promise you every single one of us is hiring this year. We've already doubled our staff this year in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're adding staff. So this is a job growth industry in West Virginia. I know all of us involved in it are adding jobs this year. So, and if you look nationwide, the amount of jobs that are being added, every year in the renewable energy sector, I think it's upwards of 70 to 100,000 jobs a year nationwide. We'd love to get some of those here in West Virginia for sure.
Well, these are exciting times. Real quick, give your website so folks can get more information.
Sure, revolt-energy.com.
All right, revolt-energy.com. You guys are based in Nitro. We want to thank Zack Drennen, one of the co-owners of Revolt Energy, for joining us. We'll have you back to discuss this as the future develops on this. This is an exciting time here in West Virginia. We want to thank you for watching Inside West Virginia Politics. Remember, we are a podcast. Download us from your favorite podcast vendor. We'll see you back here next week.